Great. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our fourth and final session of this mini course on eating as a sacred activity. Oh, you know what? Um, Let me just get you guys. What did I do with it? Just a minute. I know I was. Oh, wait, here we go. Here we go. I'm just gonna I'm going to paste the link in the chat that will take you to the texts that we're going to look at this evening. Let me know if that works. All right, great. Okay. So, um, I think many of you have been to some, if not all, of the prior sessions. But just in case, I'm going to keep. If someone else would be willing to paste in, oh, there we okay, thank you. So we've seen the biblical foundation of several different approaches to sacred eating in Jewish tradition, and the two main categories had to do with uh, limiting, in a variety of ways, consumption of meat, and on the one hand, and also the establishment of this practice of saying a blessing after eating. And I guess thirdly, the role that food can play in helping us connect with the sacred myths of our people. Second session, we focused on the rabbis of the Talmud, the Mishnah, and the Gemara, and the Midrash, and how they expanded many of these actually all of these categories. They really took them and ran with them. Really expanded the concept of the separation of meat and dairy that was really quite narrow in the biblical context, and made that in some ways the centerpiece of what Jews have understood observing kashrut to be for the past 2,000 years or so. But they also developed the traditions of blessings around meals, and adding blessings to other kinds of experiences that don't have to do with eating in any kind of obvious way. So that was another big expansion. And of course, they expanded, especially the Passover, the use of food in the celebration of Passover became much more developed than it was in the Torah by the rabbis. Session 3, we focused on medieval and early modern developments. So we looked at a couple of medieval thinkers, one kind of more philosophical, with a philosophical leaning, that being Maimonides, one with a more mystical leaning, that being Nachmanides. I know they sound very similar. We also looked at some early Hasidic texts on eating, and this idea of helping to release the holy sparks that are in the food if we bring the right intentionality to the experience. And this quote from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav that's always been very powerful for me, which is, him saying that most Jews eat to give them the strength to study Torah. And he flips that on its head and he says, but I study Torah in order to know how to eat, how to approach the experience of eating, I think from a spiritual or sacred place. So We also looked a little bit. We looked a little bit at Rav Kook, an early 20th century rabbi who moved from Eastern Europe to pre-state Palestine, first chief rabbi of Palestine, and that he was relatively positively disposed towards vegetarianism, but he didn't quite go all the way for reasons that are debated among people that read his writings. And then we looked at some Mordechai Kaplan, and actually Kaplan is going to be a good bridge, I think, into, and he in some ways, he was kind of a bridge between modern and contemporary thought. I mean, he really was ahead of his time in a number of ways, and he talked about, at least in the text that we looked at, his big idea was that keeping kosher and other kinds of ritual commandments shouldn't be seen as commandments any longer, but as folkways, as ways that we could connect with Jewish tradition, that would make us feel the presence of Jewish tradition in our lives, but not that we had to feel obligated and that we had to be consistent. He didn't feel that way. He talked about that, he hoped that people would feel free when they're eating over at a friend's house who's not Jewish to eat what they're being served as a way of creating connection, but then also if they're eating at another Jewish person's house, that they should feel free to be a part of consuming a kosher meal. So that is kind of where we have come to. Let me ask, and I'm not going to necessarily answer these now, but I want to know, does anyone have any burning questions based on the first three sessions that we can circle back to when we get to the end of this session? And if you don't, that's fine. And if you think of something as we're moving through these texts, please put it in the chat. And if there are any kind of overarching questions that have arisen for you in this study process. So I hope everyone's been able to find the texts for this evening, and we've got some diverse modern perspectives here. The first one is actually from the Reform movement, from a book that was published in 1979 called The Gates of Mitzvah, and this is the very beginning of the book's reflections on the traditions of kashrut in particular. Anybody who's got this accessible, willing to unmute and read it out loud? Okay. I will read this one out loud. Oh, Audrey, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Gates of Mitzvah, a guide to the Jewish life cycle. The Reform movement has, for the most part, ignored the question of the relevance of the dietary laws. W. Gunther Plaut, a prominent Canadian Reform rabbi, writes of kashrut. The almost total silence of Reform literature on this subject is witness to the fact that it no longer was of real concern to the liberal leadership. The Reform position was set out in the Pittsburgh Platform of 1885. We hold that all such Mosaic and rabbinical laws as regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages and under the influence of ideas altogether foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. They failed to impress the modern Jew with the spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt rather to obstruct rather than to further modern spiritual elevation.
Okay, thank you, Audrey. Let's just pause here for a second before you do the second paragraph. So this was one of the ways that, sacred eating evolved, if you will, in part of the liberal community, and the Reform movement, which was absolutely to just chuck the whole thing because it was, in the words of the 1885 platform, this is really pretty, this is strong language, right? Their observance is more apt to obstruct rather than further modern spiritual elevation. So that was like classical reform, late 19th century into early to mid 20th century. But the reform movement is very different today, and it was even different back then in 1979. So a little bit different, and I think it'll be interesting to think about how this second paragraph compares with the Mordechai Kaplan that we read the last time. Okay, Audrey, go ahead.
In attempting to evolve a personal position on kashrut, the Reformed Jew or the Reformed Jewish family should understand that there are several opinions. For example, abstention from pork products and or shellfish, or perhaps adding to this abstention the separation of milk and meat. These practices might be observed in the home and not when eating out, or they might be observed all the time. Or one might opt to eat only kosher meat, or even to adopt some form of vegetarianism so as to avoid the necessity of taking a life. The range of opinions available to the Reformed Jew is from full observance of the biblical and rabbinic regulations to total non-observance. Reformed Judaism does not take an all or nothing approach.
Thank you, Audrey. Okay, so we can see some serious differences between the 1885 platform and approximately 100 years later, when instead of just legislating that it was meaningless, they're saying, well, it might be meaningful, and each person has to figure out how it's meaningful, and there are different ways that it could be meaningful, and the whole spectrum is fine. But each person or family is going to make their own determination. So, including throwing vegetarianism in there as a legitimate kashrut option. So, and I don't expect anyone to really remember what Kaplan said. I mean, Kaplan also was trying to give a sense of flexibility. But he talked about this in a different way. Even though both he and this statement from the Reform movement are giving people a lot of flexibility, but he uses some different language. The idea of folkways, the idea of that there is this value in tradition, even though it doesn't have the same, a lot of people don't understand it in the same way. And I don't know, it's just a little bit, and I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts about that comparison. I just thought it was an interesting thing. Yeah, Barb?
I think what bothered me or bothers me about this attitude is that it's sort of saying to those who do keep kosher, you don't matter to me. That when we lived in Boston, we had very good friends who kept kosher, and and we became vegetarian, at which point they were willing to eat at our house as long as we didn't serve dairy.
Uh-huh.
And so it was meaningful to us to start keeping kosher. And eventually we did add meat. We purchased another pair of dishes and set of dishes and pots. And because it was meaningful to them, it became meaningful to us. And here's the reform movement saying, it's not meaningful to me, so you don't matter.
So I think, right, there is no language here that speaks the language of community, right? This is very much, and it's very classical reform. for the individual is the unit of decision making, full stop. And Kaplan very much comes out of this communal matrix, and he recognizes that it's even as much as it might be an individual choice, it's also got reverberations beyond the particular individual who makes different choices. And he empowers people to make different choices, but there is this presence of Jewish history and the Jewish community in a way that I think is a little bit just a little lighter, or maybe even more than lighter, maybe even non-existent in this second paragraph. But it is still a big jump from where the Reform movement was a century prior, where it was like kashrut is absolutely, the ritual is meaningless and it gets in the way. And there are Jewish people who feel that way. And there are probably members of HaLev, maybe people on this very call who feel that way. So, but it is, so it's just interesting to see, I think, that evolution. Okay.
And the addendum to that is that when I informed my family that I was going to convert to Judaism, my grandmother was concerned about two things. One was, did my boyfriend have a beard? And the other was, are you going to continue to eat bacon?
Right. Right. Well, those questions are not surprising. That's thank you. All right.
Early 70s, I must add on.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So up to this point, including the Reform text here and last week's, the modern wrestling with this is how to understand it in a meaningful way, but still very much operating within kashrut as being about picking appropriate items to eat within the general framework of the tradition. So let's go on. Let's go to text number 2. This is an excerpt from an interview of 2 modern Orthodox rabbis. Audrey, go ahead.
My comment is just that kashrut is a potential discipline, and a lot of Judaism is about separating or being patient or learning to wait, as are many religions and many practices about learning to kind of control your desires. So I just want to point that these two things kind of don't really discuss kind of some of the values that kashrut potentially can be wrapped, can encourage.
Right. Thank you for that. And so, you are bringing a Musaric perspective to this, and it's true. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I don't have any Musar commentaries in the text this evening, but that would be that's an additional dimension for people who are from people in the modern context that are looking for dimensions of traditional Judaism that really resonate, that can really resonate with Jews living in the contemporary world, and how, what kinds of psychospiritual benefits could be there. But that would have been a good text for me to pick, but I thank you. The next time we will have a Musar text too. So this text number 2, these two, Yitz Greenberg is a rabbi that some people are familiar with. This other guy, Haskell Lookstein, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with him, but they were colleagues. And this is an excerpt from an interview that they both did, I think probably in the late 70s or early 80s. Anyone want to read this little chunk here? Yitz Greenberg? Okay, Alan, go ahead.
We were both students of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. From him, we learned the idea that halacha is not just a list of ritual do's and don'ts, but a comprehensive worldview that applies to everything that happens around us. The Torah prohibits the exploitation of workers, so why shouldn't that apply to migrant farm workers picking lettuce or grapes? They were being mistreated, so it was natural for us to apply the principle of non-exploitation to their situation too. It seemed obvious.
Thank you, Alan. And I realized I didn't mention the question that they were responding to, which was what motivated them. They came out publicly and they joined the boycott, the grape boycott, and they were unusual. They were outliers in the Orthodox community, and so they are not talking about kashrut here, right? They're really talking about a different law, which has to do with exploiting workers, but it takes place in the context of food production. So this feels like a little bit of a bridging text to me, because what we're going to see beyond this is people who are bringing other Jewish values and linking them to kashrut in the sense of we should pick what we eat, not just according to, or maybe not even according to the traditional categories of animals, but maybe based on other Jewish values. They should influence too. And so these guys feel like, they're not calling it kashrut here, but we're going to see other people who do. Okay, Richard Schwartz. He's a very well-known. He's got a PhD in chemistry or something. I don't know. He's like a scientist, kind of hard science guy.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Go
Can
ahead.
you pause on that for a second?
Sure.
Where in that passage does it all refer to kosher at all? It
In number
says,
2. Yeah.
but it doesn't say the word kosher. It says halakha.
That's correct. Right.
So
and
technically, well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess my point is that technically that's not kosher, and it could be about the exploitation of workers that make steel.
Correct.
It just happens to be about a food product in that reference, and the fact that we don't think that workers should be exploited. And at that point, we're boycotting a food item. We could end up, boycotting Buicks for all. I mean, it's. I don't know that I buy that directly connects to the kosher context.
Right. No, and I agree with you. It doesn't directly connect. But Kevin, do you wanna share a thought in response to what Brian said?
Well, the great boycott was going on with lots of people. It wasn't just Jews. And so the fact that these two Orthodox Jews joined it and said so publicly, according to you, just added some weight to the idea that we ought to do that. As for Buicks, no, but Fords, yes.
Okay.
We did boycott Fords.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, right, I it's true that it could have been any arena of production, but maybe someone else has information that I don't, but I'm not aware, especially of an Orthodox rabbi or really any rabbi joining a boycott like this prior to this happening of anything, whether it was steel or whether it was automobiles or whether it was food. And I don't know if it's random that this particular boycott might have grabbed people even in a subconscious way because it was about food production. But you're right, it's not directly about kashrut, which I think is actually interesting. Alan?
I was just raising my hand to read.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Great. Thank you for that question, Brian. So Richard Schwartz, we're going to hear from Richard Schwartz. He has been a passionate, hyper-passionate advocate for vegetarianism as the best Jewish choice for about, I don't know, 4 decades probably. So go ahead, Alan.
Oh, yeah. I should mention that I didn't eat it great for about 10 years.
That's
I forgot what
powerful.
they tasted like. Okay. Judaism and vegetarianism. Can the two be related? After all, what is a simcha, Jewish celebration, or holiday dinner without gefilte fish, chopped liver, chont, roast beef, chicken, and chicken soup? And what about passages in the Torah referring to temple sacrifices of animals and the consumption of meat? Because of these factors, this book is the result of a leap of faith, an intuition that a religion that has such powerful teachings about compassion for animals, preserving health, feeding the hungry, helping the poor, and conserving resources must be consistent with vegetarianism. As I probed for appropriate Jewish teachings and concepts, I became increasingly convinced that to be more completely involved with the glorious goals and values of Judaism, one should be a vegetarian.
And it continues on the next page. Yeah.
While Judaism emphasizes ta'ar, ba'alei chayim, the prohibition against causing needless suffering for animals, animals are raised for food today under cruel conditions in crowded, confined cells where they are denied fresh air, exercises, and any natural existence. While Judaism mandates that we be very careful about preserving our health and our lives, animal-centered diets have been linked to heart disease, several forms of cancer, and other degenerative illnesses. While Judaism stresses that we are to share our bread with the hungry, 70% of the grain grown in the United States and over 1/3 of the grain grown worldwide is fed to animals destined for slaughter, as millions of people die annually because of hunger and its effects.
Thank you, Alan. Okay. So it feels to me like the second paragraph of the reform statement started heading in this direction a little bit, right? They talked about vegetarianism as an option because not only were you then observing traditional, by definition, Jewish eating restrictions, but you were avoiding causing animals pain, which is another Jewish value. But Richard Schwartz goes way beyond what those authors did, right? Because he talks about the value, the traditional teaching about not causing animals unnecessary pain, but then he goes on and he lists all these other Jewish values, and he argues that they are all most consistent with the vegetarian diet. And so that's he might be I don't know that he was the first I don't know, this was published in 2001, but he's been writing much longer than that. I feel like he probably started writing this stuff around the same time we're going to see the next person we're going to see is Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who is seen as kind of the spiritual father of the idea of eco-kashrut. But Sue Peleg and then Alan Fetterman. Yeah. Sue, you are muted.
There we go. How can we be concerned about animals when we, especially our Orthodox community, support a president who puts people in cages, doesn't provide them food or sanitary needs, how can those people not scream about what is being done to those people who we put in the cages now and say that they're not parts of our, I mean, forget the animals. We are, as human beings, are animals. So why should we be so concerned about the animals and we're not concerned about the people?
Well,
That's it.
I think that's a good challenge, Sue. You know, I mean, Richard Schwartz is concerned about the people, right? He wants to
Yes.
feed people that are hungry. He wants people to be healthy, then healthy by, having a healthy diet. So he definitely shares your concern, and that's actually at least as strong a motivation for him as the causing pain to animals. That the world, human society would be much better, he argues, if we all switched to a vegetarian diet. So, now he's not Orthodox. I just want to say, so he does not represent the Orthodox world in any way. But yeah, no, it's and this whole all of these texts this evening are going to be about, to one degree or another, how our eating impacts on the well-being of other human beings. That's really a big piece of what we're talking about tonight. Alan, go ahead.
So the second part of this really resonates with me, and uh, I rewatched last couple of weeks a short video on YouTube. I think it's called From Farm to Fridge. It's about 4 or 5 minutes, and if you watch it, you'll be sickened to see just the unbelievable cruelty. It's, he describes a crowded, confined cells where they're denied fresh air. That's just like, so that's a little fraction of what is going on. If you let me just a minute more, I want to say that milk cows, live an unbelievably horrible existence. For example, another example is chicken. They show in this video that since these are people who are raising, or, trying to get egg production, and they show chicks, thousands of them, and they have workers picking out every male chick that's born and throwing him into this grinding machine.
Ooh.
Just millions of chickens are killed all the time. This is daily. And one example after another. Cows, their lives are just like nightmare, standing in their own excrement and not able to move. One thing after another. And the fact that meat that kosher meat comes from that, and it's not considered. It's only like what happens when the moment that the cow is slaughtered with a proper knife, And so to me, if you say what is kosher, what is spiritual about it, has to do with what kind of lives these animals are living. And we can now, if you go to like Heinen's or Whole Foods, you can buy meat, chickens, cows, you can buy meat that has been raised on a pasture.
Yeah.
You pay more. You can buy eggs that are pasture raised,
Yeah.
And so that's a conscious choice, even if you don't want to go all the way to vegetarianism. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Alan, very much. I see Audrey and I see Barb. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that since 1980s, there's been a large movement to kind of acknowledge hunger and poverty. And we live in an American culture. Was not a small thing. And I always think of Francis Moore Lappé and feeding the world. But I just want to say that mainly because, well, one, there's a lot of intermarriage and a lot of couples or people, both, live in a Jewish world, but we also live in a world that's not Jewish. So I want to acknowledge that. But I also just want to say it influences all of us because we live in a country that's, whatever the habits are, and it's changed throughout time. Two, I just want to say that personally, my younger daughter was very involved in farming. And she basically, and this relates to Alan's, is that she really believed heavily in raising animals humanely. And so I personally have made this exception in my life where I will sometimes eat a humanely raised chicken.
Yeah.
I don't do it in my home, but I will do it out there in the world because I feel like I want to support that.
Yeah.
I want to support, something that's not agrobiz and is not inhumane to animals. That's it.
Thank you, Audrey. All right, Barb, and then Julia.
When the kashrut rules were developed and codified, there were no corporate farms. It was private farms. And so I think it's very logical to say that it is time to revisit the kashrut laws. And because it has changed tremendously.
Thank you, Barb. Julia, did you want to, or Brian?
Well,
Yeah.
I guess it was me actually. I just wanted to rebuttal Alan's comments about the pasture raised eggs, and that if you look at the pasture raised and the free range legal requirements, it's very minimal. So I wouldn't even consider that those chickens have a good life. They just have a less bad life, which is why, like, I work with a woman who raises chicken and I get her eggs. But
Wow. Okay, well, you've raised the bar, Julia, for people who want to, try to minimize animal suffering. Alan, you have a response?
Yeah, Julia, there's a difference between what they call free range eggs, which is they cram chickens into this big barn. They can't move, they don't go outside, and they have horrible lives. That is different than pasture raised, where they're actually running around outside in pastures. Again, every time you go up the ladder, you spend more for eggs. But if you look at the description of pasture raised, that makes, for me anyway, I feel I'm okay eating those eggs. Yeah.
Alan, just a heads up. This is Brian. I used to work for the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and I was responsible for all confined animal feeding operations for the state of Ohio.
Oh my God.
That was my first job when I left after grad school, as I worked for the Ohio Department of Ag, and I frankly did it till I couldn't. Alan, you're completely right. I had to go inspect veal. I had to go inspect where eggs come from. For anybody that doesn't know my background, I'm the grandson of a farmer. I'm the nephew of a butcher, and actually, in my current life, I'm actually building a meat processing facility in California right now. So I have a lot of the Ohio laws on what you think is pasture raised eggs is what Julia shared. It is it is square feet smaller than a half bath. That is the law of the land, and I've been there and I've physically seen where our eggs come from. It's fine. It is what Julia said. It is less bad. It is less bad. It's not good. It's just less bad. And I've seen some nasty stuff.
Wow. Thank you for that. Wow. Well, see, this is great because clearly a number of us are very engaged in this conversation about the welfare of animals, to one degree or another, influencing the decisions that we make in terms of the food that we purchase. So, and that was powerful and kind of depressing to hear, but important. So, thank you. All right, we're gonna do Reb Zalman, and there's a chunk here. He is the spiritual grandfather of the idea of eco. He came up with the term, apparently. I could not find anything that he wrote from the 1970s, which is when he says he came up with the term. And I have no reason to doubt that's true. But I couldn't find anything from that period where he's actually saying, I am now coining the term eco-kashrut. But so how about two people? One person reads the first three paragraphs. These are all kind of just different chunks of his teachings taken from different sources. But someone to read the first three paragraphs, and then someone to read the second two, and then we'll talk a little bit about Reb Zalman. So are there two people? Or it could be two people on the same screen even, if you wanted. It doesn't have to be that, though. Okay, Bruce or Catherine? Bruce, would you?
Yep, sorry, I'm on my phone, so it for the audio part, and it took me a while to get to the
That's
undo.
okay.
So shall I start?
I can finish.
Okay,
great.
we'll tag team.
Okay.
I invented the word eco-kosher to say that something is ecologically kosher. Now I'll give you an example of eco-kosher. The regular kosher way is about the dishes that mustn't be contaminated, etc. If I pick a cup to have coffee, styrofoam would be the best thing to have. It hasn't been used before, and after I drink from it, I'll throw it away and nobody else will use it. From the usual kosher place, that's the direction to go. But in comparison to what will happen to the planet by my drinking in a styrofoam, I'd much rather make the other choice, eco-kosher. Somewhere in the 70s, I coined the term eco-kosher. I raised the question about one-way bottles that in the classical understanding of kosher are more kosher than two-way bottles. But I argued in contrast, eco-kosher would claim that the one-way bottle is less kosher than the two-way bottle, and that there is a real question from eco-kosher halacha if electricity from a nuke is kosher. Boy, how that's changed.
Yeah.
This awareness of how veal was produced led to a revolt by Jewish consumers who refused to buy veal until the practices were changed to become more humane. This represented one of the early ways in which eco-kashrut began, by invoking the principle of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, the suffering of living beings, as an integral part of what it means to say that meat is kosher.
Great.
Now over to...
Where are we? Right here.
Yeah, right there.
There were enough people who refused to buy non-union grapes to allow the effort to organize and then improve the working conditions of workers to be successful, at least for a time. This corresponds to precedents in halacha which forbid buying products produced under extortion or under slave labor under duress. Even if all the ingredients are kosher, it has an unethical taint which makes it forbidden. At this point in our thinking, it is abundantly clear that the basic command in the Torah, do not destroy her trees, extends even to those trees whose fruit is only oxygen. Beyond this, it extends from the minor to the
Major, sorry.
the major, by Kal Vachomer to the entire planet. It begins from a mere thou shalt not, the Torah's simple prohibition of cutting down fruit trees during a siege, to extend to the Baal Tashchit,
Tashchit, yeah.
the prohibition to destroy the entire planet. If homicide is a capital crime, how much more so is being an accessory to planeticide?
Thank you. Thanks very much to both of you. Okay, so Reb Zalman, he's was great. He was global in his thoughts and also very kind of stream of consciousness sometimes. And we just dropped into like 5 different thought processes that he was having. But so we can see, and he might have preceded Richard Schwartz by a few years. I really don't know. I don't know when Richard Schwartz really started writing, but they're close to being contemporaries in terms of writing about food. But you can see where Reb Zalman goes beyond Richard Schwartz, right? Because Richard Schwartz is concerned about vegetarianism. That's his main ecological and, I don't know, societal concern. And if he can convince more people to become vegetarian, that'll have all these benefits. And in that respect, and it will fulfill all these other Jewish value commitments. And in that respect, it is an authentic form of keeping kosher in his mind. But then Reb Zalman goes way beyond. It's not just about, in fact, Reb Zalman, I don't think, is actually necessarily as concerned about vegetarianism per se, but he is concerned. They do share a concern about the suffering of animals, and so he wants Jewish people to think about the food they purchase from that perspective of, buying things that are at least less bad, as Brian and Julia said, than the alternative. And then, of course, he goes even further and he talks about, I think this one-way and two-way bottle is about recycling. He didn't use that term, but I figured that's what he meant. No, Kevin, you don't think so? You'll have to help me then.
I think he means bottles that could be reused. It used to be a time that milk came in glass bottles, and you could put them back, and they would be cleaned and filled and sold again. You don't hardly see that. There's only a few dairies that do.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for that. So he's saying that by traditional kosher standards, you wouldn't want a bottle that's been refilled because of the danger that the milk is going to get some kind of something in it that's going to make it non-kosher. But from an eco-kosher point of view, he's saying, well, but it's much better to have a two-way bottle because you're not destroying things unnecessarily that way. And then he makes this little side comment about the production of energy, and that has there's a legitimate kosher dimension to, and we're going to see Arthur Waskow kind of, fills this out a little bit. But but for Reb Zalman, it's not even just about food. It's about every aspect of our lives and the extent to which we make choices that lean towards a healthy planet versus choices that lead towards a planet that is in distress. So that's a big shift that he brings. Kevin?
To follow up what I said, there was also a time, maybe it's still now, that when you got kosher for Passover food, you were told that it was the first original use of that container.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not know that either. Thank you. So, everybody feels like any, questions about Reb Zalman? We're gonna go on, if no one has any, to his main student, Arthur Waskow, who just recently passed away. And Arthur Waskow was an incredibly prolific writer and he founded the Shalom Center in Philadelphia, and that he had decades and decades of kind of finding inspiration in Judaism to engage politically from a spiritual foundation. A little bit like, I think he and Michael Lerner had a lot in common for people who are Michael Lerner fans. So, all right, let's go to Arthur Waskow. So we start at the bottom of page 2. Again, we've got this is a chunk. So I think maybe we could read through it and then see what jumps out at people. But okay, maybe how about 3 people for this one? We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 paragraphs each. Okay, Alan, you ready? You're willing to read again? Okay, great. And so do the first 3 paragraphs, and then someone will jump in.
It reads to modern eyes like a cookbook. The Torah portion of Shmini begins by telling us to bring beef, mutton, and pancakes to the sacred altar at the transcendent moment of its dedication. It ends by making sure that on any ordinary day, we do not eat whales, hawks, camels, or shrimp. But even in our ordinary lives, some foods are sacred. How did biblical Jews get in touch with God? By eating and choosing what to eat, not by murmuring prayer. When Hannah did that, the priest Eli thought she was drunk. Why by eating? Because in the deepest origins of Jewish life, the most sacred relationship was the relationship with the earth. For shepherds, farmers, orchard keepers, food was the nexus between Adamah, the earth, and its closest relative, Adam, the human. So ancient Jews got in touch with God by bringing food to the temple. With our bodies, we affirmed, this food comes from a unity of which we also are a part, from earth, rain, sun, seed, and our own work. It came from the unity of life. So we give back some of it to that great unity.
Thank you, Alan. Okay.
In our
So this is kind of a overarching kind of his philosophy of eating as a sacred activity, as it's rooted in biblical psychology, and he argues that it's the center of Jewish spiritual life in the biblical period. I saw a couple. I saw Audrey, and okay, go ahead, Audrey. You want to say something or read or both?
Read.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Why don't you do the next 3?
Okay. In our most mundane moments, we affirm through the rules of kashrut that what and how we ate was holy. And in our wildest poetic fantasies of the history of humankind, we thought that what went wrong was somehow wrongly eating, a mistake that brought upon us an earth that would bring forth only thorns and thistles for us to eat, as we toiled with the sweat pouring down our noses. Today, most of us have shrugged away the bringing near of sacred food, the sacred choice of foods we do not eat, the sacred pauses, so that 1/7 of the time we do not grow our own foods. We think that resting is a waste of time that could be used to make, invent, produce, do. Let's see, I have one more, or is that it?
Yeah.
Indeed, the last few hundred years, the human race has invented the most brilliant act of work in all its history. We have affected the planet, its very biology and chemistry in ways no species ever has before. And we have invented the Holocaust, the H-bomb, global warming.
Thank you. Okay. Just want to make sure people caught that reference in the first paragraph that Audrey read. when he talked about when something that in our poetic fantasies we imagine that what went wrong, what was wrong with the world started out with making a wrong choice in eating. So what did that? Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Um, I Does that have to do with eating meat versus plants? And
No,
it's seen as a no?
no, but that was good. It's good, but it's a very specific reference biblically. Barb?
Well, I was going to say that humans 200,000 years ago were migrating rapidly into new places where there would have been new vegetation and new animals. And how would they know what is safe to eat and what isn't? And it was by experimentation, so that if you ate the wrong plant, boy, you got sick. And they could carry that over. Therefore, if you get sick, you've eaten something wrong.
Right, great, right. So there were very kind of practical reasons for this, and he is talking about a biblical story. It is right. It is right. So Kevin, what story is it?
Sue says it's eating the apple.
It's Garden of Eden, right? That is his. He was a very, very sensitive reader of text, and he's saying like that's what started all of our problems was an act of eating. He's not talking about the particulars of the story, but that the first act of disobedience was an eating act. Like that's pretty powerful when you think about it, right? Why? It's kind of like the question that Brian asked before, like, why boycott grapes? We could boycott other things. It's true. Why was eating the first, place where human beings like went off in the wrong direction? So yeah, I love that he came up with that. Barb, did you have a follow-up that you wanted to say?
No, I was willing to read.
Okay, I'm gonna call.
Pass.
You'll read the last three in a sec. Audrey, go ahead. Oh.
Blessings do not occur over meat. They occur over non-meat items. So
Oh, are you reading or are you
no, I'm just saying. I'm just saying kind of like it's a kashrut blessing kind of connection that there's this sense that eating meat is like if you bless that, you'd be blessing it that you killed something in order to eat. And I just want to point that out because that's not something I always understood, but I think it's a very interesting little tidbit.
So I will go along with you on that partially. There is a blessing that is traditionally said over meat, but it's the most general blessing. You say it over any meat, you say it over any beverage. It's shehakol nihiyah bidvaro. So there is a blessing, but it's not particular to meat, whereas most other food categories have blessings that are specific to themselves. So I think there is something that meat does not rate its own blessing, like so many other food groups do. And there might be something in that. That's really interesting. I never thought about that before. Thank you. All right, Barb, why don't you finish this up?
What can we learn by renewing the ancient text? For shepherds and farmers, food was what they ate from the earth. For us, it is also coal, oil, electric power, paper, plastics that we take from the earth. For shepherds and farmers, kashrut was the way of guiding their eating toward holiness. For us, eco-kashrut should do the same. We should ask, is it eco-kosher to eat vegetables and fruit that have been grown by drenching the soil with insecticides? Is it eco-kosher to drink Shabbat Kiddush wine from non-biodegradable plastic cups? Is it eco-kosher to use 100% unrecycled office paper and newsprint in our homes, our synagogues, our community newspapers? Might it be eco-kosher to insist on 10% recycled paper this year, 30% in 2 years, and 80% in 5 years? Is it eco-kosher to destroy great forests, to ignore insulating our homes, synagogues, and nursing homes, to become addicted to automobiles so that we drunkenly pour carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, there to accelerate the heating of our globe?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So he really builds on Reb Zalman's idea that Reb Zalman just kind of tiptoed into this notion of maybe, there are ways to think about this outside of the strict consumption of food. But then Arthur Waskow really expands this, and he uses eating in a very metaphorical way, and argues that you can apply the notion of kashrut, the notion of fitness, to all kinds of consumption, food, energy, you name it. So so it's a very big, it's a big vision that he's painting here, and he really is the fruition, so to speak, of Reb Zalman's initial teaching. Julia and/or Brian.
Julia?
It's me now. I really like that passage with the idea of taking the kosher idea and bringing it, the eco-kosher, bringing it into the daily lives, and how we can be more resourceful, or better stewards of our resources. Like, for instance, I'm going to pick on everybody on the Zoom call, or most of the people, right? Like, when you have a video showing on the Zoom call, it uses more energy to transmit that. And well, obviously Steve's camera should be on because he's leading the call, that, we're all sending all these, using this extra electricity so we can see each other's faces. So just an example. Sorry.
No, that's not something I've ever considered either. I appreciate it. And I just want to say, since you mentioned this, and you're on the call, and Catherine is on the call, and Purim is coming up, I just want to mention that for the last several years, for Purim, the chocolate that we use has been free trade very intentionally. So just whatever, it's a small little thing, but it's, Catherine guided us in that direction, and Julia's keeping us going. Alan?
So as long as you mentioned that, I took a quick break and I ran to my refrigerator and looked at my eggs. And it turns out that there is a certification called Certified Humane.
Huh.
So, for example, with pasture-raised eggs, they go way beyond, and they have a whole list of the requirements to be humane, way beyond the like state requirements, So you could, it's an equivalent to free trade or fair trade chocolate, and so we can look for these things, and we can do better just by using that kind of standard.
Alan, where do you buy your eggs?
Oh, I just get it at Dave's.
At Dave's, okay. Good to know.
They have a whole variety of them.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to now, this is a, related but a slightly different turn here, and I want to make sure we get done on time, but the next piece is about something called the Hechsher Tzedek, the justice. I'm not going to be able to translate Hechsher, but the rabbinic sign that it's okay, that it's fit, that it's kosher. But this rabbinic sign is really focused on different aspects of treating the production, the people involved in the production process in a just way. And the conservative movement, to their credit, started working on this about 20 years ago, maybe 18. So maybe two more people to read. This is from an article in the foreword. I could not find like an original document that described the creation of this, but this is an article that kind of gives a little bit of background. So Bruce and or Catherine.
Actually, I think Catherine wanted to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, but if time is if time is short, I won't.
No, I think there's time for you to share what you wanted to say.
Well, I actually donate to Certified Humane. It was started by a veterinarian a number of years ago, and she went around and started looking at different animal facilities to make sure that it wasn't just the letter of the law that was being followed, but that the animals were actually treated humanely. And I mentioned that in part just to bolster Alan's point, but also to also bolster the idea of the conversation we're having right now. I think is really important in that we're talking about what is good enough today and what is good enough in 2 years. As far as how we want to think about our community.
That's great. Thank you, Catherine. Is that veterinarian? Is that Temple Grandin by any chance?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's great.
And you also wanted readers?
Yes, please. Would you guys do that?
So, yeah. Leaders of conservative Judaism are planning to create a new ethical certification system for kosher food in response to the findings of a special commission that investigated working conditions at the nation's largest kosher slaughterhouse. The 5-person commission, formed by the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism and the Rabbinical Assembly, was created following an investigative report in the May 26th edition of The Forward, which detailed a series of allegations about treatment of workers at the agri-processors plant in Postville, Iowa. Members of the conservative panel who visited the Iowa plant in August and September recently issued a report saying there are significant issues of concern at the plant, including issues of health and safety. Keep going?
Yeah, do one more, yeah.
Conservative movement leaders said that they plan to establish a tzedek heksher, or a justice certification, that would ensure kosher food producers have met a set of standards that determine the social responsibility of kosher food producers, particularly in the area of workers' rights.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, Catherine, do you want to finish it?
Sure.
Okay.
The head of the Conservative Movement Commission, Rabbi Morris Allen, said that any certification system would be a supplement, not a replacement, for current kosher supervision. Allen said the additional level of scrutiny is necessary for the religious bona fides of the industry. We have reached a point where it is not sufficient to teach and promote the whys of keeping kosher, Allen said. It is necessary to ensure we talk about how our kosher food is produced. The conservative movement put together a commission to investigate the Forward's allegations and made 3 trips to the plant. The report that came out of these visits said that the commission came across a number of concerns in speaking with workers and management. The list of problems included inadequate or non-existent worker safety training, concern about unsafe chemical use, and unclean and unsafe lunchroom conditions.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. So, okay. So, I have a feeling that probably a lot of us have some familiarity with this Postville whatever they're called, the agri-processors. It's actually been a saga. I wasn't even aware of how much of a saga it was, because I was Googling Postville, and it started a few years even before this whole investigative report from the Forward, when people belonging to PETA snuck into this plant and photographed and made video recordings of how the animals were being treated. And I'm not gonna say anything specific about it, because it's kind of like what Alan was saying before. Maybe, it's just disgusting what was going on with both the chickens and the cows in that place. And there were 2 incidents where someone from PETA infiltrated and captured video and then publicized it. I don't know if there's any relationship between those processes and the Forward doing the investigation. Maybe they're 2 separate things, I don't know. But then the Forward went in and they found out, in addition to whatever was going on with the animals, all the workers there, they were all, like a huge percentage of them, and it's such a timely thing, they were undocumented. And not only, so fine, they were there have been lots of undocumented people doing lots of, important jobs in our country, but the owners of the plant took advantage of the fact that they were undocumented by not giving them even the minimal amount of, health and safety precautions, because they knew that these people couldn't go to the authorities because they would risk getting kicked out of the country. So anyway, leaders in the conservative movement heard about this story in the Forward, and that sparked them, and they went and they did their own investigation and decided that this was a real problem. And in response to that, to this plant in Postville, they began to work on this whole idea of a Hechsher Tzedek, justice certification, and not just for this plant, but for any business. So anyway, the drama is the place went bankrupt, but then they were bailed out by a really wealthy Canadian Jewish guy, someone who was in the Orthodox community. And I think the person who had owned it, who went bankrupt, was like rehired to work there. But then there was like someone brought a lawsuit against this guy, and he ended up going to prison. I don't remember what the charges were. This was like the owner of this kosher agribusiness plant. And also kind of interesting in a timely way, he was serving like a 20-year sentence, and he was one of the people pardoned by Trump, I think in his first term. After he was lobbied, Trump was lobbied by people in the Orthodox community who, were allies of this guy, and they they thought he was, treated unfairly in this whole legal context. So it's been like a 20-year process. And I want to say that there were, after the conservative movement started working on this justice certification, they got a lot of pushback from the Orthodox community, especially the Orthodox traditional kosher certifiers, because I think they didn't want anyone horning in on their, this was their thing. And they said, they agreed that there were other Jewish principles that could apply to some of these situations, but they had nothing to do with kashrut, with keeping kosher. That was a completely separate category. And these, these wrongly thinking conservative rabbis shouldn't be conflating, kashrut laws and other kinds of Jewish laws. And there were some Orthodox rabbis who went in and defended the Postville after they were accused of these things. And they said, no. Everything is fine. The way the animals are being treated is fine. And the way the workers are being treated is fine. Eventually, some people, the conservative Hechsher Tzedek people, were able to negotiate a little bit with the Postville ownership. And what did they agree to do? Oh, they agreed to bring in a Spanish translator. That was one thing that they agreed to do so that people could actually communicate, with each other. That was the biggest thing they agreed to, actually. But there were Orthodox people who were deeply disturbed by what was going on in the Postville plant, and we're going to read a representative of that part of the Orthodox community to conclude our study together this evening. So could be one person, could be two people. This is Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz. He was just in Cleveland. He led the Tu B'Shvat Seder at B'nai Yeshurun on Erev Tu B'Shvat, which I meant to do more promoting of and did not manage to do it. But so I don't know if anyone went to that. But Kevin?
I'm happy to read it both.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
The moral demands for ethical kashrut are enormous. It is up to us as members of the modern Orthodox community to follow the Rav's intellectual tradition. It is up to us as ethical citizens, no matter our religious denomination, to ensure that not only do we work in a dignified way, but that all workers, no matter their occupation, are treated with dignity. We have much to do to treat all workers humanely, to reduce our environmental impact, and to ensure the food fit for consumption is prepared in such a way as to amend the countless inequities found in, I guess, the food industry. And then someone quoting Rabbi Yanklowitz, as an Orthodox rabbi, I want to defend kashrut publicly and have found it increasingly difficult to do so, given the ethical standards in the kosher industry, including worker treatment and animal welfare, said Yanklowitz, who is distressed that the halachic community is often more concerned about the cost and taste of kosher meat rather than the moral message of kashrut. Quote, I believe that kashrut emerged from Torah as a vehicle for the sanctity of life, to bring the Jewish people closer to God and closer to one another, end quote.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. So this guy is a very impressive person. He founded an organization called Uri L'Tzedek. It's an Orthodox justice organization. And this is one of the issues that they work on. And he's a very charismatic teacher, also incredibly prolific. He's written, 20 books. And he's not even that old. I think he's like... maybe he's like in his mid-40s or something. He's pretty impressive. Anyway, but he represents this part of the Orthodox community that really understands the importance of incorporating these other Jewish values into this important part of Jewish life of producing kosher food. And that to the extent that that doesn't happen, it undercuts the spiritual, religious status of the product, regardless of whether it is by the by the letter of the law in terms of the slaughtering process, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't all the time. So any last comments or reflections on our little journey that we've taken together through Jewish history over these 4 sessions? Yeah, Alan Fetterman?
I think it's a little dilemma. It's a dilemma that if you want to eat meat that is sourced from ethically raised animals and ethically slaughtered animals, where are you going to find that? And you want to keep kosher at the same time. They seem to be mutually exclusive. I don't have a solution for that, just an observation.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So, Audrey, yeah.
We've covered so much ground. I think, for me, and this comes both from my background in the non-Jewish world and in the Jewish world, and that is being vegetarian covers so many values, and it's not an all or nothing thing. It's not like you never eat meat. It's more like, do you make that a huge part of how you organize your eating? And I think in our discussions about kashrut and all these other ethical issues, there is no one total answer. But I think there's just different compromises that people make, and that will decide on a community,
Thank you, Audrey. So, yes. So in response, I have a couple of thoughts about Alan's question, too. So I think someone said this already tonight, but there are people in the Jewish community who buy the least bad food products they can in terms of how the animal is treated, and for them that is their kashrut. That is it. They basically have left the traditional ritual kashrut and they say, I'm going to get the eggs that you described. Like those are kosher eggs for me now. So that's one thought. And the second, and then Bruce or Catherine, is that there is a little tiny intersection between traditional kashrut and eco-kashrut in the Orthodox community. And that is the most expensive. If you put kosher and eco-kosher together, and it's the most expensive kind of meat, but you have to special order it. There actually used to be someone in Ohio who worked with a free-range farmer and got them to agree to have their animals slaughtered by a traditional shochet. And this woman, was selling kosher, eco-kosher meat. So, but you had to pay. You had to pay. All right, Audrey, hold on 1 second, Audrey. I want to just Bruce and or Catherine, and then we'll go to Audrey.
It's Catherine.
Catherine.
So, as you and I conceived this class, Rabbi Steve, we were, sort of thinking about where we wanted to go with the community, or whether we wanted to make any changes or not with our old kashrut policy. And you raised the concept of sacred eating as being an avenue that might be the most important thing for us in the community, as opposed to thinking about specific changes. And after listening to these 4 classes, I love that concept of maybe enriching our community through making intentional changes that we are all ready to make. I hear a lot of different points of view. And yet we're all sort of similar but different in how we think about food, about how making, how to make it most humane, how to make it most spiritual, how to make it, we sort of all have our own conception of how that works. But I feel like I've heard comments from everyone about how they think about food and how it fits into their lives as far as how to make the world a better place. And I wonder if there's a way to sort of bring that whole aspect to the community through our communal eating.
Well, that is the question of the hour. That is, thank you for kind of giving us the big picture of this process. And I think, hopefully this is going to be something we're going to be talking about at the Deepening Your Roots event in May.
It will indeed.
Yes. Yes. So that'll be one opportunity for sure to broaden this conversation and the related conversation about, what are there any things we can take as a community from this study and in terms of how we approach our communal eating experience. So thank you for that very much. And Audrey, you're going to get the last comment, I think.
I think Catherine did such a wonderful wrap up. I just don't want to say anything other than Shari Tikva's Rabbi's wife, former Bernstein, was the one who actually had kosher and kind of eco-kosher meat. And she
Right. I forgot that she was the person who organized
Oh,
that.
yeah. I remember that very clearly.
So it might not be so easily available anymore. I mean,
we're it's all a matter of, it's a big country, and I bet in the large communities like New York, you could find it. And anyway, but it's really partly, I suggest eating more vegetarian is easier.
All right. Well, thank you for reminding us about that connection. So thank you, everybody, for sticking with this for 4 sessions. And I hope it has felt like we've gotten to see a little bit of this evolution within Jewish tradition around this particular practice. And a similar kind of evolution exists for pretty much every other traditional Jewish practice. So maybe we'll look at some other ones at some point down the road. I
just want to thank you for all the work you did putting into this, and I thought it was a very fruitful class. I really appreciated it.
Thank you. It was a total pleasure to get to do this with all of you. And
Alan said fruitful.
Right. Good. Yeah. Listen, it's hard. I realize it is so easy to make. We have so much food, imagery in our language. It's like you can make a food pun without thinking about it, So that is great. That is great. So, all right. Wishing you all a good rest of the evening. I hope the snow does not, cause too much difficulty for everybody tonight and tomorrow. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Alan, for Zoom hosting all of these too, okay? Okay. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.